Welcome back to the Four Horsemen of Real Estate podcast. We're here to break down the numbers, the trends, realities shaping the real estate market today. I'm your host, Neil D'Souza, and we're driving into something that might surprise you, but really, I don't think it should. Did you know, according to the National Post, that 4 out of 5 newcomers to Canada are now relying on food banks? Think about that for a second. 4 out of 5 people who arrived in Canada looking for a better life, many with degrees, experience, and they're struggling so much that they're lining up at the food bank. Now let's break this down. If you're a newcomer earning a minimum wage, maybe working multiple part-time jobs, and you're paying $2,500 a month in rent, what's left over for food, transportation? Heaven forbid that you've got children in childcare to take care of. And that's why people are being forced to turn to food banks, even while working full-time jobs. The connection between housing affordability and food insecurity is simple. The higher your housing costs, the less disposable income you've got, the less you're going to have for the necessities like food. This isn't just about unemployment. Many of these newcomers are working, but are still falling short. The government doesn't offer some sort of support for newcomers by and large. There isn't enough EI and other resources for newcomers. They don't qualify for a lot of these programs. Whether they should or shouldn't, it's something that we as Canadians have to consider. But right now, it's not enough to keep up with the rising costs. And let's be real. When someone's struggling to pay rent, their first priority is keeping a roof over their head, and then they worry about food. It becomes an afterthought. Okay, so why are newcomers facing this uphill battle? Obviously, we've talked in previous episodes about the lack of affordability. There's a severe shortage of rental units, and the demand outweighs the supply. By and large, most newcomers are going to come to major urban centers where the cost for rentals are expensive and increasing. Slow development. Even the government programs aimed at increasing housing supply, with the amount of red tape, the zoning laws, high development costs, these things keep new builds sitting on the sidelines, and the market is just moving faster. They can't keep up. And then finally, if we talk about an investor-driven market, many investors are keeping whatever money they have on the sideline because of all of this government red tape. They're concerned about taxation, higher capital gains. Investors are by and large being rewarded for taking their money to the States rather than staying in Canada and being penalized by our capital gains taxes. And so many times it's pricing out the opportunity for investors to come in there and create supply by taking a single family home, making it into a duplex or a triplex. And as a result, that supply stays off of the market. Now, let's talk about that part that nobody really wants to talk about, the immigration levels versus housing growth. We know that Canada welcomed, 500,000 plus newcomers every year over the last number of years. And we're nowhere near building in that regards. While the Liberal government has continued to bring in more and more immigrants, refugees, students, without considering what housing they have available to them, we've seen such a drain, such a demand on real estate like no other. Wonder why rents are going up? There's more and more demand due to these policies. Okay, so where do we go from here? This isn't just a newcomer problem. It's also a problem for Canadians because of the affordability crisis. Half of Canadians, that's right, 50% of the country are living paycheck to paycheck, bill to bill, and they're feeling the financial stress. Literally, they're calling it financially paralyzed. If you're feeling that, you're not alone. If you're one of the ones that expected that your expenses would be manageable, but meanwhile, right now, you're facing massive financial stress, half of Canada is going through the same thing. So how did we get here? Obviously, we know all the money that was created out of COVID. We know that we had extremely low interest rates. all of these things, government checks, COVID checks, all of these things have added to our money supply. And we've watched as housing skyrocketed. Yeah, just the other week, I talked about Kingston being in a state of emergency, people stuck in their homes, having to heat their homes, therefore they can't afford food. There are many people across the country facing this very same crisis because they've bought homes at the maximum value they were able to afford at that point in time. And then as mortgage interest rates went up, it put the squeeze on them. As the carbon tax went up, it's put the squeeze on them. Fuel costs, all of these things have continued to go. Food costs have continued to go up. The government has no intentions of removing the carbon tax. Actually, let me correct that. I know that Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland have now started talking about pausing it. But the reality is that they plan on bringing it back. Look, guys, the Liberals, obviously they implemented the carbon tax. Great, we want to care about the environment. But what do we got right now? We've got people that are starving. We've got Chrystia Freeland and we've got Mark Carney, both who are running for the Liberal leadership, both of whom are saying that they will pause the carbon tax, talking about, they didn't really support Trudeau in doing that. How long are they going to pause it for? Remember, they're using the word pause, not talking about getting rid of it. Maybe there is a case scenario for us to pause it, but for how long will they do so? Under what circumstance will they bring it back? How long will they wait for Canadians to be able to feed themselves before bringing that back? And then on top of that, will we see a reciprocal effect from grocery stores? If you remove the carbon tax, you pause it for a little bit, will the grocery stores in turn allow the prices of food to come down? Or will they try to take that in profits? Will trucking companies, will they lower the costs? Or will they try to take it in profits? These are all questions that a new leader is going to have to address. How do we make sure that if we remove the carbon tax, it gets passed on to everyday Canadians so that they can be able to afford heating, food, housing, and the like? Okay, guys, look, I'm not here to tell you what to do with your paychecks. I'm not here. You already know, and you're working on how to, if you're in this situation right now, you're already working out how to get through that. For investors, obviously, you've looked at the market and you're considering whether to acquire more properties, to keep investing here in Canada or go to the United States or whatever you're planning on doing. You're already making those plans. But this is just something important for us to understand that is going on here in our country right now as we are facing this upcoming election. So as I end today, guys, understand the real estate market, it's definitely slowing down and people are feeling the effects. The cost of living isn't magically going down overnight, and we need to take this into account. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, I'm sorry to hear that, but take measures to be able to get yourself into a better financial situation. No one is coming to save you. The government isn't going to fix this overnight. The housing market isn't going to crash like it did in the 90s. If you're waiting for that to be able to buy up a bunch of real estate, if you want financial freedom, you have to take control of your own financial future. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode. Thank you for watching another episode of the Four Horsemen of Real Estate podcast with me, your host, Neil D'Souza. We'll see you guys next week.
When the ones around trust in their word, they walk the talk in the world of investment, they make their mark.